When you look down range at the $375 light or the $37 light that I picked up off Amazon and they throw the same beam, and I'm not a tier one guy, I want a light that's reliable, that does what I need it to do, and doesn't break the bank. And yours does something that other lights don't do. Welcome to episode 21. Yes, number 21. The show is now fully legal of the Frugal Firearms podcast. The podcast that's here to reveal stuff that you're just not going to find anyplace else. And not only do that, but save you money and make the most of your investments in shooting. Today is going to be a really very interesting show because we got a prototype. Well, not literally a prototype, but we got a pre-release version of something that you guys are going to want. I mean, I'm going to want it. My co-host Ken's going to want it. You know, everyone really in a home defense scenario is going to want. We had the opportunity to look at Full Spectrum Lighting's new 180-degree weapon-mounted light. Yes, I did say that. 180 degrees it illuminates. So not worrying about how large the cone is, and you've heard all these discussions before about, various competitors talking about how big the center dot should be and how wide the throw should be on the cone of light. This covers it all. And we did actually do some measurements on this last night, and we're thoroughly impressed. So we've been talking to the owner of this company now since the SHOT Show, coming up on 10 months ago, Mr. Roy McGovern. He's joined us online. But first, as always, let's bring on my co-host, Ken. Ken, what was your impressions of the light that we reviewed last night?
Very impressive. I mean, I have been used to your typical weapons mounted light where it throws a beam pretty much just in front of you, with a certain width. This particular one gave you complete illumination, 180-degree illumination. I think the human eye does a little over 180 for most people, like 185 to 190 or something. I mean, kind of the reason I know that is my mom had macular degeneration, and of course, one of the main thing about that is you lose your peripheral vision, and until finally you lose your entire vision. So it kind of shrinks from the outside in, and but the great thing about this light is, wow, we did it outdoors. We tried it in several different scenarios, and when you turn it on, it's like both sides of you, everything that you can see on the side of your peripheral vision, as well as what you focus on, most likely at the center, is illuminated. So if there's somebody standing there, you didn't know it, or a dog, or whatever it might be, very impressive. So
Yeah.
we had some interesting comments that we wanted to mention about it. But with that, I can pass it back over to you, Craig, and we can get Roy going here.
Yeah, we don't want to, shoot our dog or shoot, much less a family member or something like that just because you hear a noise off to the side. And it's going to sound euphemistic to say it's like the sun coming up, but it's much more of a daylight-like scenario than you can't even imagine this really honestly until you use it, unless you simply go to turn the lights on in your house. How much better this is than what's out there. So welcome to the show again, Roy McGovern,
Thank you.
creator of the Full Spectrum Lighting. And Roy, what was the inspiration for this? Why do you enter a space that's so damn crowded with competitors, all the way from the cheapest thing on Amazon up to the very expensive competitors?
Oh, I still ask myself that question. But yes, you're up against creating a new car tire. It's round, it does the same thing over and over. And so that redundancy starts to limit the scope of ingenuity, right? And so when I owned a mortgage company, I helped out a lot of law enforcement folks, and I had no technical background in engineering or constructing flashlights, but there was a incident where someone was killed, and I watched the body cam over and over and over, and it was resoundingly scary because Sacramento is notorious for how many trees they have, and it is very, very dark in certain neighborhoods there. And so that being the impetus of trying to help the situation that is presented to these deputies and officers, that's why. And I kept asking myself, what if they could see a little more? I'm saying a little more in addition to their existing weapon-mounted light. And so I came up with this Frankenstein idea of bending an LED holder 180 degrees and putting that inside a reflector housing. The main issue is that you don't have a cone anymore, right? So it's going to be a completely different style of light. So there wasn't much to work from or any reference points. And so after having a couple samples of it, I attended a Cops West convention down in Ontario back in almost 3 years ago. And it won the best in show, or excuse me, most visited in the show both days, but unfortunately it was too large for their gear. And so there were about 30 agencies there, and 19 of which were very selective with, Roy, if you can build this that fits our pistol and long gun, we are absolutely interested. We'll absolutely help you. You can ask us every question you seem or you may deem trivial. And so I have to give them the majority of the credit because I would keep coming up with scenarios that I learned, just like you or Ken would, online. You would see performance, you would see lumens, you would see battery life, but in reality, a lot of those product bulletin details don't apply to the majority of the situations that they needed me to help with. So, for example, when you have a Corona and a candela, right? So the hot spot is on the wall. That's your candela. But the aura around it is your Corona. Well, the brighter a light on a wall is, the less and less you're going to see on your left and right. It's just that's how the eye works. And so oddly, they were getting too bright in certain circumstances because they would bounce off, acrylics and gloss paint, walls, windows, mirrors inside the home. And so those that was just an example of how at times the industry is very disconnected with the end user. And so, as of about 2 months ago, I finally was able to get the samples that are basically 95% done. The rest is just going to be cosmetic, slight updates, battery, USB-C charging port, things like that. But one of the other things before we move on that struck me as astounding is that of all the flashlights in the world, none of them that go on a gun have a warning when the battery's running out. That to me was the most lacking detail
Hmm.
that I had ever experienced when comparing one product to another. And so I can speak freely about it now, but there's a husband and wife team in Stockton, California, and they work evenings. And that's one of the more dangerous locations in the country.
Oh yeah.
And oh my goodness. And so they would describe certain situations where you don't have time to change a battery during a foot pursuit or even in a clearing of an area, they're not even they're gonna turn their gun light off and go to their backup I'll call it traffic ticket light,
Hmm.
right? So that was very helpful to me. So I said, well, listen, what if on the back of the gun light, resting against the trigger guard, if two extremely faint LED red lights came on when you had less than 20% left? And he said that is going to be the best thing, in my opinion, Roy, that you could offer. I get the whole 180 degrees. That's really intriguing and it's very effective for us. But when I know the battery's going to die, that keeps my confidence high. It keeps my panic low. And so it's actually pretty clever because the light is so weak, it'll only illuminate if you're right-handed. Your left hand, your thumb, you might see a little bit of red on it.
Okay, so just to make sure what you meant by that, because you said the light is so weak. You don't mean the light coming out at the
Oh, no,
target.
no,
You're
no.
No.
talking about the LED that refers to battery strength
Yeah,
only.
back
Okay.
toward
Yeah.
your eyes that you can see
Y-
when the weapon is
So you're
deployed.
not getting blinded by your own or distracted by your own battery indicator, and it's not using much power.
Oh yeah. It's a very subtle glow. I'll call it the radius of an IV poke, right? When you got to get an IV at the hospital, it
Mhm.
is about 2/10 of a millimeter round.
Okay.
And so it's waterproof and there's no sealant. That's how small that hole is.
Mm.
Um, because the water will just film over. It won't penetrate something that tight of a radius, but it will because when your gun comes up and it's at eye level, you'll see your thumbs, a very faint red light, and that is not meant to capture any amount of attention other than go to your backup light. So you click the light off, go to your backup light, you're in business.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, well, what kind of battery life are you seeing on the device? Just your average person. And by the way,
Yeah.
okay, let's set the table for this. You vetted this through primarily law enforcement and military in the design process. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you see your going forward? I mean, obviously you've got that market because you vetted it with these guys, and I'm assuming that many of these departments are going to follow through and do the right thing and actually buy your product, once it comes to, fruition and final design and becomes available. But what is the rest of your anticipated market look like in terms of, like, say, homeowners, things like that, individuals, and does the design change at all for those markets, or is it the same product?
I think there could be another iteration of it that wouldn't require much. Like we had discussed, I'll call it tactical versus consumer. The tactical version, we had the left and right LEDs dimmed a little bit just in case you're clearing a larger, say, parking garage where there's no power. That
Hmm.
that's that's a mainstay in Central California. So, you start to round the edges. Well, you don't want the lights that you don't want them too bright. But again, for the consumer, and then it comes down to battery life. So, does the consumer want all three LEDs blindingly light or bright? Sorry. I would say yes. And so, if battery life can be sacrificed a little, and taking into consideration these shooting scenarios for a homeowner or a carjacking, they're not going to last more than 2 or 3 minutes. If somebody's going to carjack you, the hope is that you can get your gun up and hold it kind of at the window as you're looking away to blind anyone coming towards you. But that situation would go fast. As far as the home protection, I think it's the same thing. I think if you go out to your backyard, where I live, there's a lot of detached garages and they get robbed a lot. So if you're going out into that setting, I would think a lot of shooting ranges and range masters would tell you if it's out of your sight, line of sight, stop pursuing it, back away, call law enforcement, and get a very safe defensive position. So that's a long answer. The quick answer is yes. I think it's appropriate to have a consumer version that'll last a little bit less than the tactical, but a lot brighter because you don't train for that every day like they do.
Because you mentioned the thing that the reason that we saw the amount of light output that we saw. And by the way, for listeners, no one here is saying that the prototype or the 95% version we saw was not an adequate amount of light. It is absolutely adequate,
Yes.
particularly indoors. I mean, I was using it outside at ranges of nearly 100 feet.
Right.
And Ken, you said it last night, Ken. I mean, would you take a shot at 100 feet with a handgun? I mean, if,
I'd have to have a darn good reason for it.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, defensive range is, probably 15 yards, would be my absolute maximum, you
yeah,
know.
because probably anything beyond that, unless it's just some sort of a, I don't know, Hollywood almost unimaginable situation, you may not be justified in taking the shot. There's probably
Yeah,
other people around. I mean, it just isn't
yeah,
probably a bad choice. But
yeah.
at
The longest shot I would ever probably take is inside the church where I go to, or
yeah,
where I sit type of thing, where it's a larger auditorium type of thing. And if I had to take a shot, that could be upwards of 100 feet, and that would be and very planned if I would have had to do that.
that's a tough one though, because there's going to be so many people around, and I mean, even getting
Exactly.
day or night, getting a clear shot's going to be a tough one no matter
Exactly.
what. But Roy's product used indoors, which we also did, and used in an outside corridor, which is kind of
Yeah.
simulates an alley. It
Yeah.
was it was great.
It
It
was
was
awesome.
absolutely cool.
Totally awesome.
And for people to understand the type of light throw that we're talking about, the lens on the device throws kind of a bow tie effect. Now imagine the
Hmm.
knot of a bow tie, and it's a bit rectangular, isn't it? That
Hmm.
center section is not round. It is, in fact, rectangular, like almost like the silhouette of a standing man, which is kind of a neat feature because it illuminates a person fully, head to toe, at a very reasonable range. But then the two lobes, shall we say, to the left and right, are sort of again the bow tie effect of it
Yeah.
spreads vertically, which arguably is a good thing because as you scan to your left and right, even if you're not actively scanning, but peripherally, I said that right, didn't I?
Yeah.
Peripherally scanning, you're getting some vertical information, a guy on the floor, a guy standing at the top of a stairwell, something
Right.
like that. So yeah, go ahead, Roy. I hope I didn't throw you off your story there, but
No,
really we want to talk about what differentiates your product from all of your competition, and feel free to name them if you want to. And you told me, by the way, that the law enforcement people said that they had a couple types of lights, which I won't mention if you don't, that they wanted to be able to fit into their holster, and you want the form factor to be able to use the same holster. And that's not saying anything bad about those companies. It's just yours is different.
Yeah. And those holsters cost money. Yeah.
oh, exactly, Ken. And I'll never forget there was almost 20 locations that their fleet manager and the range master came over and they said, "Oh my goodness, that would be so awesome if you shrunk it down." But then there were six of those locations that said, We will buy those the moment they're ready, as long as they fit our Glock 17 and Safari Land holster." And so that constraint proved incredibly difficult. It felt like we were building a smartphone. When you start expanding from a single LED to three LEDs, the problem is you have to have a driver, right? You have to have a toggle as well, because if you want to go from 180 degrees down to 35 degrees, you need what's called a driver as well, like a printed circuit board. Now, if you have like the most two traditional lights out there are Surefire and Streamlight, and they have one cone and one LED that throws the light. So that put into perspective is very, very simple. That printed circuit board is about the radius of a nickel. and
Yeah.
the LED is right in the middle of it. So all you have to do is connect a battery on both ends and you're hot. Now, if you try to tell an LED holder, which is just imagine a real thick, heat sensitive piece of duct tape with three LEDs on it, to switch from 35 to 180, that created a logistical issue. But I do think the folks that I'd met, especially the state of California and Stockton, I mean, they were just probably getting annoyed. They didn't show it, but I could tell. I'm like, man, I'm asking them so many questions. Well, Craig, you hit on a very important aspect. At about 15 feet away, they didn't want the round. They wanted me to throw a doorway. That's why it's rectangular. And so when you're clearing a doorway and you have slightly less illumination within that 180-degree span on your 9 and 3, you're hopefully seeing enough in your periphery where it's not something you need to fire at or engage with. Hopefully, you're aiming at a doorway or a hallway or walking around a blind wall that has a long span, right? So that way you can kind of turn the light as you're walking around a corner instead of getting your entire body or your entire right arm around the corner to clear it. But yeah, the quick answer, that rectangle is very much intentional and it's to throw the doorway.
Because what I'm envisioning here is almost like, and what you've been talking about seems like the light was designed for interior space, searching a house, searching so forth, and I can definitely see what you're talking about, where you want to have that square or rectangular illumination, and then the other one is the outdoor one. I'm thinking of, I watch the cops who do up in Alaska or in different parts of the country.
Oh,
They're never indoors. They're always outdoors someplace. And to them, I think the wider center thing that throws a further distance one. So I almost either envision like two versions of the lens, one for interior sort of work. That's where you anticipating it being for urban environments, and then perhaps one for more out in the country type people, where people are going to be throwing things at a further distance or whatever, and they're going to want that
yeah.
that longer throw. So
Do you mean interchangeably? Is that what you
not
mean, Pat?
necessarily interchangeably. I mean, you might buy it with. I mean, the lenses that I basically saw that were on there. I mean, you can buy it with one lens, which has what we basically saw, like
Long range and short range.
a long range and short range type of thing. And depending on, what type of work you tend to do. If you're an urban cop and you're in an urban environment, you're in buildings, you're in these things, okay, then you want this particular lens. If you're not, if you're, country sheriff, you're out in the middle of Wyoming or wherever, you're just doing further things out, then you need the different type of lens. I'm just spitballing
Well,
it here.
no. You're spot on. As a matter of fact,
Was that a pun?
well, the state of California. So imagine you're in the middle of nowhere approaching people that are poaching fish.
Right.
And that's black dark. That's like where I live in Western New York. I mean, it is there's no light. But what we did is you can see on the sample that you have, there is a half dome.
Hmm.
Okay, so we'll call that a dome refractor. All it does is magnify the light. That's all. That's every headlamp, every high beam headlamp on every car. It's just a little dome in front of a big LED. And so we're going to put three of those
Hmm.
on for the out for like Madera County, for Fish and Game, for Henderson, Nevada. I mean that the light, you lose that light. And if there's no reflective properties where you're at, like more desert landscape,
Yeah. Henderson.
that's the
There you are. Right.
oh my God, that's
Yeah.
the lights. That's the lights vulnerability. Every single one. It's if you don't have anything for it to bounce off of. But no. I'm well, we were very aware of that. And for certain scenarios, because you always hear about the larger agencies, but there's far more that are not in urban settings.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, NYPD, they very rarely have any gun lights. It's so dense, and there's so much light all the time. So that was peculiar. I guess every department allows you to buy your own equipment and holster, as long as it's Rangemaster approved. But um, like you said, Ken, when you're outside, if you're on a traffic stop on I-5 past Bakersfield, you know, there's at times there's nothing. You want to at least circle to one side to keep them both in a span of light. That was exactly what the captain told me. She said, "We have pulled up on people so often and they run left and right hoping one gets away." And
Huh.
when you turn a focal beam on someone, you're going to lose from the peripheral deterioration. You're going to lose that person running to the left or right, the
Hmm.
opposite direction. And so, but yeah, quick answer, there's going to be a triple dome frontal reflector housing, and it's going to be chromed on the inside. The one you have is just a matte black. The reason we did that is I wanted to see if the LEDs eventually melted the lens housing under duress.
I didn't notice any thermal effects at all. I mean, we ran
No.
it quite a bit last night. I mean, for an extended period of time, and I never, there are companies out there where they have a reputation for having very hot lights, and I won't mention who, but
Yeah.
I thought yours in the configuration you sent us, which I understand is not production, I thought it actually ran rather cool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it will come down to the proper heat dissipation is critical, especially when you start getting like these name brand lights. They're adding more and more power. It's almost like if you go to a Top Fuel or a funny car race, they keep getting faster and faster, but more and more dangerous, right? They blow up faster, right? You know, they used to have 8,000
Yeah.
horsepower. Now they have 12,000 horsepower. So you used to have 500 lumens, now you have 1,000. So I think it all
It's
comes
marketing.
down.
It's all marketing.
Yeah. 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 What else do you have? I mean, it's such a restrictive product. But I think a lot of it's going to come down to the type of LED. There are actually LEDs with little domes on them.
Yes.
Okay, so if you, all right. So we're thinking of doing domed LEDs behind the refractor domes. So you can turn the battery down a little bit and get the same brightness, right? So I think those are the ways to work around it. But yeah, having the top flat and long relative to the LED size. So what slides under the gun to the polyurethane portion of the gun where the Picatinny rail is.
Hmm.
A lot of the flashlights aren't flat. They're undulating. So you'll have a round, say, lens cap in the front,
Right.
but then it goes to an oval body to hold two CR123
Right.
batteries. So you don't have that uniform surface. Well, mine has a uniform surface from front to back on, you know, on the ceiling of it. So when you see the production version, it's going to be even, it might even feel like it's underperforming because the whole thing will be metal, but the heat sink is going to touch the top and both sides. So it'll send all of the heat back. And by the time you're touching that toggle, it would only be maybe lukewarm.
So is it going to be aluminum or zinc? Are you going to do the I mean, because aluminum dissipates heat a little bit better than zinc does, or but it's less expensive than titanium or something.
Yeah. The heat sink, imagine you have your round battery, and our heat sink is U-shaped. So the battery fits into the heat sink. On the outside of the heat sink, the LEDs are wrapped around it.
Hmm.
And so it not only pulls any heat collection away from the LEDs, those aluminum walls are touching the ceiling, and so the battery stays protected, and you can charge it more often. I don't want to split hairs, but the higher and higher of a temperature you put the battery through, the less and less it will recharge
Right.
to 100%. You're going to have that constant degradation downward.
Yeah. Lithium ion batteries only have a certain number of cycle times. Yeah, we get that
Yeah.
before you have to do it. Yeah.
I'm sitting here slightly incredulous because you we've talked before, Roy, and your background is not engineering, and
No.
this is about the most engineering show I've had yet. I mean, in terms
Oh,
of the detail and so on. I mean, people talk roundly about features, but I mean, you really understand your product, and all the background you ever gave me didn't give me any indication that you'd be able to have that much of a detailed knowledge of what you're doing.
you know, I think, and I'll try to summarize it. Maybe for another podcast we can go into the full reason, but I wanted to be in law enforcement, but I didn't want to go to a local academy, so I figured I'd get a job and save up and pay for the academy, the Post Academy in Sacramento, so I could go anywhere I wanted. Well, I got a job, and it was the worst job ever. But it was a bill collection agency, and they said in the newspaper you could make up to 5,000 a month, right? So I figure, okay, you know what? I'll work here a couple months, boom, back to the academy, done. Um, Not so much. So these American Express bills would range from 5 grand to $500,000. And so the collection effort required mortgage lending. So some of these corporate and platinum and black card holders would refinance their house to pay that bill off, most commonly with a builder who ran short on his funding and put 10 houses roof bids on the Amex card. Well, you only have 30 days with those cards, and then it's due. So I just referred everyone I could to Transamerica Financial because I'm not a confrontational person. And the loan officer there said, "Hey, I'm on salary and you're getting to know how these home loans work. And I highly recommend you start a small mortgage brokerage because you will have the cheapest referral source on earth that is of the highest revenue per transaction compared to, say, a small little second mortgage or a rate and term refinance where the fees are very minimal." So I started Sterling Mortgage Services, and American Express found out directly, and they loved it. And so that was in 98. Well, in 99, I'm traveling the world to their call centers, telling the bill collectors how to properly refer somebody for a home loan to pay off Amex. Okay. So way more money than I ever should have made, and it's very out of touch when you stumble into something like that. But I got really sick, and it was late stage brain and spine cancer, and
Mhm.
it happened very, very fast. My mom worked at UC Davis as a peds oncology charge nurse, and so as I go through that process with UC Davis and Sutter Health Systems, I'd always wanted to give back to them. And unfortunately, the cancer came back and Stanford said I was to be put on hospice, but I have an oncologist that was just so steadfast and thick-headed. He said, "No, no, I'm going to get Blue Shield to pay for a bone marrow transplant." And it worked, praise God. And
Oh, yeah.
so, and then the market crashes, but I'd always wanted to give back. So I started Roy's Umbrella. And that was a blue collar Angie's List, if you will, for the two hospitals and all law enforcement in the greater Northern California area.
Hmm.
So a lot of the, Sacramento, San Francisco, Placer County, El Dorado County guys, they would call us for a purchase or refi, whatever. And it was just remarkable how stressed they were. I'll never forget that sensation of what's going through their mind on a daily basis, and how these departments, how these hospitals didn't have a facilitator for the most semantical things. Life insurance, credit repair, mortgage, whatever, car insurance, you'll become so overwhelmed with your job. Military, my goodness, the PTSD after that is identical to what I went through, in certain sorts. And so Roy's Umbrella was a very popular mortgage company. We worked with Rush Limbaugh, bless his heart. And so we became trusted. And so that was my way of giving back. And so I paid the salary for an art therapist in peds oncology where my mom worked. And to think that, after this foot pursuit where someone was killed, the nobody wins. The police department or sheriff's department, what could we have done different? The family of the victim, could we have raised our child better? There's so many abstract topics that are never covered in the media, never covered by anyone who is afraid of sharing an opinion back then. That's exactly why I started with the flashlight because somebody did it for me. My oncologist helped me, right? And so it felt with the gear that these guys had in some circumstances, it felt that they were like just a standard customer walking into a store to buy a gun light at full retail.
Well, they are. I mean,
Yeah,
okay, maybe they
crazy.
get a law enforcement discount or a military discount, but I mean, the technology hasn't moved, and all you
Right.
can advertise is lumens and perhaps battery life, or maybe
Yeah.
size, or perhaps color temperature, and that's really esoteric because most people don't even understand color temperature. Then, that's that. What else is there? I mean, you're the only one I've seen in this space who's actually innovated anything
Right. In quite
in
a while.
ever. I mean,
Yeah.
well, except for weapon mounted lights and okay, magnetic charging is pretty cool too. I think that's
Magnetic charging is very
that's
cool.
There we
pretty
go.
neat. But other than and by the way, yours does not have a magnetic charger, and I don't disparage it for that because I'm sure that that takes up space in the cavity to put the coil
Yeah.
and everything else in there. So that may not be very efficient. What other technical challenges? I mean, yeah, you've listed a bunch of them, but are there any just maybe highlight ones that make a good story that you'd like to say that you ran into? Again, not having a background in lighting and or engineering.
Well, again, I have to thank and appreciate so many people in procurement. The folks in Texas at Cy-Fair, Cypress Fairbanks, they've been wonderful. But so have multiple agencies, and I think it came down to I'm not picking on these companies, but this was their feedback, not necessarily mine. But the okay, the Streamlight has a toggle that is more intuitive for the human touch. The Surefire, however, you can push it forward. You can momentarily blink the light, and I think that is very important. And the reason is because San Luis Obispo SWAT team said if you're pushing, you're going to keep your gun on target within a third or half of an inch more than if you're turning up or down and you're putting ancillary pressure on what you're trying to aim at. That literally split a hair down the middle, but it made perfect sense. So, what if we did both, right? What if we had a light that pushed and toggled? And so the Surefire, at least, on my, research online and some of the locations where it's really cold, it's rounded. So when you're trying to activate it, it takes a lot more poundage of pressure relating to turning it off, on, toggling it up, down, forward. The little buttons, if you will, they'll pop off. So if it
Hmm.
gets really hot, like Arizona, or if it gets really cold, like if you're in the Dakotas or New York, upstate, those little covers on the little metal toggle, they'll pop off or they'll get stuck. So the task was to create one that does both, and that is more user friendly. And so it was interesting because it's almost like you want to design it for somebody with smaller hands, just because it's a little easier if your thumb is long enough to press the Surefire. And I know I'm getting into the minutia with this a little bit, but if you compare both of them, and a lot of lights just have a toggle on it,
Right.
like a teeter-totter.
Hmm.
People with smaller hands appreciate that more, so they're not reaching around their gun with their index finger or reaching their thumb forward with their supportive hand.
Hmm.
So it was those types of comments and feedback that have us. I can't wait for you guys to see the production unit, because a lot of these are tension loaded or vertical spring, but this is a leaf spring. There's only one coil. And so it's going to be resting against that spring, a leaf spring. So when you push on it, it'll throw 180 degrees. If you let go and you toggle, it'll go 180 or 35 degrees.
Hmm.
That we're really proud of. That was very difficult to do because you're doing, there's a couple inner componentry that you have to take into consideration. So if it's one button doing one thing, that's fine. But you have to press all four buttons to throw 180 on the momentary. But then you have to have two buttons when you're toggling if you want it 35 or 180, right? So you have to go diagonal and touch two 180s, or you have to go diagonal the other way and touch two 35s, right? Those buttons for the 180 degree and the 35 degree um, are critical to that functionality and sequence. So that we're most proud of, because the rest of it you can kind of work through, right? Like if you want to lose the USB-C charging port, fine. Put a magnetic, wireless charger on it. Yes, it's a little more cumbersome, I guess, and they don't charge as fast these days. But the toggle and the triple dome front lens, we're really proud of that.
I like the magnetic chargers. I had a Microsoft laptop that had a magnetic charger, but it was not one where it required a coil like my iPhone here requires a coil to receive the energy. It was just a magnet to connect it up, and it had little gold connectors and would connect it up. And I like that aspect of it. I could almost see something like
Yeah.
that because it takes no space to do that other than you're going to have a what are those powerful little magnets called neodymium, or I'm probably mispronouncing
Yeah,
that.
you are, but that's okay.
Yeah, magnets on it, and then I'm thinking about, okay, so you want this whole form factor to be able to fit into existing holsters. So you probably want to know what are the most common existing holsters that take these streamlights or whatever they are, so that people don't have to buy a new holster.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Ken, because although so for the Glock 17, it's proprietary. So that railing system is ever so slightly different than some of the other guns. And so I think the solution to that is, I call them K rails, the railing system that, slides into place on the
Hmm.
bottom of the gun, Picatinny rails, if you will. But we can simply modify the sharpness of the 45-degree angle. If you look at an uppercase K rather than a lowercase k, right? So some guns will accommodate different measurements. Now we're getting into the tenths and hundreds of millimeters.
Yeah.
But still, it makes a big difference. So, for example, the Glock compared to the Sig Sauer. The Sig Sauer cross latch bar, I'll call it a shark tooth bar, that is twice as wide as the Glock 17.
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
so if you put mine on the Sig Sauer, it could potentially rock forward and backward
Right.
about 1.5 millimeters. So,
Well, if it's on a P320, there's enough issues with with tolerances apparently.
Anyway, yes,
Legal
but
disclaimer, I don't really know this for a fact. I'm only listening to other people, but apparently there's a lot of
still be an
tolerance
issue.
issues there anyway.
Yeah. But no, I understand. That's why some of the other, I mean, Craig and I both have various lights that we purchased over the years, and they have a bunch of little components that come with it. Just fitting on a Glock, or then you install this little part here. If it's not on that, you put this little part in it, and it's that crossbar exactly that you're talking
yeah.
about. So
But thank you for I hope you're keeping it, the ability to remove and replace the light without tools. You're keeping that, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So what
Because
I
I
was gonna
hate that. I hate it when I have to use a screwdriver I mean, it's so unnecessary to me.
yeah,
I also think it's cumbersome. And so if it were simplified, right? So if you look straight down at mine, it's got three bolts on either rail. You're not taking springs out, you're not popping things loose. You're literally using a 1.5 millimeter hex drive, and you're taking those rails off and putting different rails on. If
But
you,
but you do that once,
one
and then
time,
the rest of it is
oh
just
yeah.
the little spring-loaded clip on either side that you pull
right?
down to release it from the gun. That's what I was talking about.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because that's
Um,
so much better than having to use a screwdriver to take the entire assembly off the rail.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, seriously, th this actually happened. So, one of the folks, we were at a shooting range, and he twisted, um, he was tightening the gun light, and it broke the head off, and it was stuck on his gun. And so,
Oops.
but to see that, that is so rare.
Makes it hard to send in for a warranty then, doesn't it?
Oh
And
my goodness, but it's just, I mean, in the most critical of moments, you know, as you're about to join a team and you want to swap out a battery and you can't take it off, and then you twist it the wrong way by mistake, just whatever, who knows? But I think we keep it real basic. So you, with your thumb and your index finger, you pull down, slide the thing off.
right.
No twisting and spring loaded to the left or right where it kind of clips on and then you tighten it. Nobody was a fan of that.
Hmm.
They wanted to be simple, basic, intuitive. I think the most repetitive phrase I heard is your fine motor skills go out the window when you're in a tactical setting. I mean, none
Yeah.
of these people are wearing earplugs, earmuffs. You're not at a shooting range. Those gunshots are 10 times as loud. They're pointing at you. The last thing you want to worry about is manipulating a light, you know? So I agree with that, Craig, for sure.
Talking about, since your design is so unique, you have a patent on this already, right? And and
Yeah.
how do you plan to, I mean, the wolves will be at the door on this because the idea is so good. I guess my concern is that other people are going to make a little tweak to what you're doing and then market it as an innovation that they didn't come up with.
Well, and yes, I think with 100 patents, that's still going to happen. But I do think that within any industry, you have, I'll call them DUI attorneys or car crash attorneys, right? They will do whatever they can to make money. Patent attorneys can do the same, and they will file a design patent that they know, good and well, you could easily circumvent that. And so you need to have utility patents, right? So if you have any chance at fighting someone off, especially a larger company, you have to have multiple utility patents, and in this case, we do.
Good for you.
Oh man, that was the hardest part because on a utility patent, it's 19 pages long and there's not one image. So you have to describe this with uh, calculus theorems, and you have to try to doc without imagery how a light from multiple sources can be thrown in plurality. So a beam in plurality is what we were granted. And that's incredibly hard to do because the LEDs will either overheat or they will be so weak. It's almost like the little headbands you can put when you work on your car.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You're not controlling any of that light, right? That those are just brighter than the little red battery warning indicators. So the light frays up and down. You might see 10 feet. That's about it. So to house that, to throw a rectangular beam of sorts, that patent, that was a turning point. Incredibly expensive, but once we realized, bless my stepfather's heart, he was a calculus professor, but he helped write a lot of it, because it is a study of motion and light and refraction and other aspects that compared to the Nike swoosh,
Hmm.
right? That's a very standalone, non-duplicative scenario that they just were fortunate with. Um, but the typical design patents are worthless. They really are. You can get around them so quickly, but I do not see, and actually one of my minority business partners, so he's a Hall of Fame UFC fighter, and he's been around a lot of product introductions, endorsed a lot of products. And so the first thing him and I talked about was, Roy, I want to hire a competing patent attorney to see if he can puncture this.
Hmm.
And if he can't, I'm in. And so we did, and that was very, very helpful, because you do get tunnel vision on things when you're convinced and you believe in the person that helped you, you're thinking in a harmless way, how could this go wrong? I mean, the patent office awarded this, right? But you can still have fringe rights to certain things like the V8 engine, if you will, or tires, if you will. It's very, very hard to keep the patents effective unless they're utility patents.
So tell us about so when you get the light out there in the real world, what kind of warranty you going to offer, and how is the light going to be sold?
Well, we're gonna do a 12-month warranty, but it's gonna have to match whatever they have. So the law enforcement, the agencies, the first bulk order would accommodate those agencies. There's 19 of them, and so I'll get their feedback as far as the warranty, but I'm wide open to that. Now, to the retail market, that's different. People are going to demand, 3, 5, 10-year, sometimes lifetime warranties on
Well,
things,
not for the
which is,
battery, they're not. I mean, that's not realistic, is it?
No.
oh, for the battery, no. No. And so I think there's going to have to be some give and take on that with the consumer version. But, as far as selling it, there are some large wholesale distributors that wanted to be involved. So I think though Amazon, for annoying as it can be, is a validation source.
I
Like
agree.
people will go to a website to buy something, but the first thing they do, sometimes opening up two browsers, they're going to look at the Amazon listing and see the ratings,
Yep.
for an arm's length opinion of the product you're seeking.
Well, and to know the street price because the MSRP and the street price could
Yeah.
there's a product that I want to test that I've been having trouble getting a hold of the company, and their MSRP and their street price differ by more than 50%.
Oh, yeah, that's
I mean, that's an
uh,
extreme example.
yeah. I mean, golly, these poor guys. But there's a flashlight that retails at 375 bucks, you know?
Mm.
And it's got military contracts. It's on 90% for now of law enforcement and military. But that you might see them get as low as 300, maybe 325. And I'm thinking, well, if we come in less than that, if we come in less than the top selling tactical light in the world and it's more effective, you don't necessarily need a really low or a really high price to sell it. You just need what's reasonable, right? Like, so if the wholesale distributor says, well, they're going to retail at 325 and our cost, we're not giving you more than 225 because we have to make a profit, that's about a 30% margin. I I don't know that we go more than 25% though, because then you start to delineate between who's more important than the other. What if somebody doesn't have access to the wholesale outlets that you might? And so that's when I saw that, and a couple of the agencies said they buy their lights retail. That's unacceptable.
I
That
agree.
is, I mean,
Well, if you have that a big of an agency and that big of a budget behind you, but remember what show you're on, Roy. This is the Frugal
yeah,
emphasizing firearms podcast, and I mean we're all about value. Now, I think that your product, and if you don't want to tell me, that's fine. I don't need to know what you anticipate the MSRP to be, but your product is differentiated by its technology and its utility is quite a bit different. So I'm going to be willing to spend more to get your product than some other light that when you look down range at the $375 light or the $37 light that I picked up off Amazon and they throw the same beam,
yeah.
and I'm not a tier one guy and I'm not going to be using it to beat other
Crawling
people.
around in the mud and yeah, using a hammer and a nail.
Right. That's not our typical listener.
No.
I want a light that's reliable, that does what I need it to do, and doesn't break the bank.
Yeah.
And yours does something that other lights don't do, but I'm not spending 10x to get a name brand because, you know, some military units that have ostensibly,
Unlimited
I
budget.
work for the federal government. I understand how this works. You have end of the money sweep up and you have to get rid of that money. I know how this works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, but that's interesting you say that because as it ties into the patents, you can get that knockoff. I mean, probably for 20 bucks now instead of the 375. And it's the same light. And they look identical, and there are US based websites, or the majority of their population are US consumers that allow that, right? So we have the patent on the beam in plurality, but more importantly the heat sink,
Hmm.
right? So how would you do that? How would you, and again with Amazon, the one thing that they absolutely deliver on is if you're patented and trademarked and you notice anyone at any time copying or duplicating, they'll pull that listing the next day. And so when you get into the typical gun light, they all sort of look the same, because I don't know that you can have patents on anything other than slight differences on the toggle or spring-loaded, crossbar. I mean, they all have
exactly.
a lot of similarities.
What did you hear when I met you actually when I went to your booth at SHOT Show? What kind of feedback did you get from, just the people attending there? Because you talked about testing this with largely military, and by the way, as a follow-up to that, sorry to cut you off, but
No.
what military units, if any, can you name that you're working with? But at the same time, or at least what services, but how does what difference are you getting back from the civilian, let's say alpha and beta testers as opposed to the LE and mill guys?
Well, what I did, and it was a unique setting at the SHOT Show because I wasn't there to sell anything, so to speak. It was we wanted as much final feedback on top of what the agencies specified. And so when people would walk by, we would just say, listen, we are not for sale. All we want's your opinion. And I think that was extremely effective because the people will let their guard down, right? They know that they're not going to get jammed up to buy something, but their opinion is valuable. And it certainly was because the impetus of that interaction was, do you want to come up with your gun and throw a 35-degree beam or 180 and why? And so I would show them, the normal gun light. And then on the blue gun, the Glock 17, I put hours on there. Um, and so resoundingly, and it was interesting though, because they would go 35 like they're used to, but then they toggle to 180 and they said, oh, and you could just see it. You could see that, um, how do you say, transcension into, oh my goodness, this is easier, right? Like if I can see the whole room, that'll take me about 3 to 5 tenths of a second as opposed to spanning or painting the walls or cutting, slicing the pizza. Um,
And you said you
and
timed that, right? You actually have empirical data that talks
oh
about
yeah,
how long it takes to, quote, sweep a room, at least with the light, as opposed to with
yeah.
your product.
Oh yeah, and I'm being very generous with the single light on off on off on off because
Mhm.
usually it's not equally incremental, right? So you don't go 3 tenths of a second, 3 tenths of a second, 3 tenths of a second. You'll probably go a blink to where you think nothing is there, but if you do discover something then you won't even have cleared the other area, right? So there could be somebody on either side of the room, and you you would had to have made a decision to turn your light off because it's somebody hiding in a corner, and there's a person on the other side of the room that has a gun. And so that process can take up to 3 or 4 seconds per room, as opposed to coming in the room, lighting it up once, if it's not enough, fine, but you're not in a spot where you're moving your head, right? Your head always stays parallel with your gun. So if you move your head, whatever's to your right or left is your vulnerability spot. So I would rather, and a lot of people said the same thing, as they would enter a room, they would rather blink or momentarily activate the light at 180 degrees as many times until they feel comfortable. But on average, it's once, maybe twice, right? Like if you walk into a living room, turn it on, your eyes will go from your left to your right in about 3 tenths of a second, like this. And
Hmm.
that's it.
Well, nobody could see what you were doing because
Well,
this is an audio
exactly.
show.
Well,
You guys get
just
the
so you can
idea.
see the example but yeah, if you imagine standing at a doorway and just starting from your 9 to your noon to your 3 with your eyes as fast as you can scroll them,
Hmm.
um, that that's a fraction of the time that it would take to move your entire head to your 9, to your noon, and to your 3, because
And
that's
that's a
how a lot of them are trained.
and that well, and you just said it. You said trained. A lot of users out there are not going to train in low light. Just they're not. They'll
Yeah,
train at a square range during the day or in indoor range that's well
good
lit,
point.
and they'll put a light on their gun and hope that when the rainy day comes that the light works, and they will not train with it.
Yeah.
So that's why, listeners, this is why you want this product.
Oh my goodness. It just and play, it's funny. Um, John in Stockton, he always calls it cops and robbers, because I have been to that guy's house, him and his wife, so many times, and we literally play cops and robbers. Like, go hide. I'm gonna find you. Um, and I can't understate that or overstate it. It just it has to happen, right? If you're gonna buy a gun light, you need to goof off with it, once or twice a month, right? You have to clear every area. You need to drop to the ground, do a somersault, stand up. You know what I mean? You have to have fun with it.
Okay, then tell us
But
about your durability testing on the light then. I mean, the physical
uh,
durability part, not the, I mean, you could mention battery life, but I think you've already covered battery life because it's a variable according to how much energy you put into the unit at a given, the flux, if you will, of the energy. But yeah, as far, and you've talked about overheating, but what about physically? Is the thing as durable as your competition?
it certainly is probably more because when you look at a flashlight, it's flat faced. And
Yeah.
so if your gun is pointed to the ground, and you're walking up to a situation where you haven't raised it yet and it slips out of your hand, God knows why, you hear a screeching car smashing into the back of your patrol car, whatever the case, you drop the gun, it hits dead center because, the gun's the heaviest part, so it's going to go straight down and it's going to hit the lens dead on. There won't be any deflection properties of that impact, as opposed to instead of a flat surface, you have a rounded frontal surface. It's
Hmm.
going to be extremely hard to have that gun drop, maintain that vertical descent. It's probably going to list a little bit left to right, but if it's rounded, it's more likely the hand, the grip of the gun would probably hit first. But as far as the durability, I mean, we dropped it off a roof and it just bounced and worked. And that was with the toggle you mentioned. And not to mention just last week, I'm like holding my breath, but they said the testing's going fine in Cyfair and they've dropped it. They tossed it to someone else and they intentionally drop it as though you're trying to toss it over. Here, put this on your gun, go, whatever. So they were going through every little semantical way that it could be dropped, bumped into. But it's interesting you say that because I was always curious why the barrel of the gun was shorter than the extension of the light. Um, and as I find out, a lot of the weapons will not fire in close quarter combat when you have to hold your gun to somebody's rib cage, say.
That's right. Takes it out of battery. Absolutely true. Yeah, yeah. If you press the slide, it will take the weapon out of battery.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, that again, my goodness, home loans would never have taught you that. So, but it's those little things, it's those little nuances that I just kept, neurotically, I kept a list of every little comment I could. But back to the SHOT Show, I think a lot of the people there were, how do you say, either retired or active military, retired or active law enforcement, but they'll always seem to have a friend or a wife or a husband that isn't. And you could see them talking, as they're kind of goofing off with the light. And it was very helpful to hear those conversations about, oh my God, this really makes up for not being in law enforcement or things like that, little subtle nuances that you would think are innocuous, but not at all. Like if if your husband's a police officer or your wife's a sheriff, that doesn't make you as adequate with a firearm as he or her. So you better have something that makes up for that as best as you can. And so that was interesting is, you see people like something and then they start to open up and share some personality traits about how it could help them individually. That was cool.
So now this is your full-time pursuit?
Yeah, I had started with the first light, the big handheld. I called it the Walk the Dog light, or the Zoom 180 instead of the C180. But the iterations of that utility patent are endless. Maybe this time next year we'll be discussing the long gun light.
Ooh, how about micro pistol light? You thinking that way too?
Yes, I noticed there was one. There was one similarity, and up until recently, but some of the manufacturers are going to a custom square rectangular battery. And if I can do that, as long as it's okay to be a little wider, like I mean, Surefire knows what they're doing, but it's a little wider. So is the Streamlight. A lot of lights have two CR123 batteries width.
Yeah, side by side.
Yeah, so if we go square, single, it's almost like an 18350, but you'd call it like an 18250. So 25 millimeters long, but like a cube, a rectangular cube. So
Yeah.
it would sit, there would be no wiggle room, but it would do the exact same thing. It would be just as bright, just the battery wouldn't last as long, right? Just when you shorten the light, you shorten the battery, it dies
Okay.
fast.
I can live with that. I mean, that would be, I think, fantastic for, opening the aperture to, oh, that was almost an optical term, open the aperture to other markets out there.
What I envision is, I know you're trying to stay within the existing holster technology that's popular out there, but I see an opportunity for you to basically have a magnetic charger that would just click onto it as you insert the gun in the holster. The magnetic charger just clicks onto it, and not one of the ones that uses the induction method of charging. No, 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 just the
Yeah.
magnetic one. Just clicks on there, and then the holster itself carries a battery pack that's molded into the holster, which has some 32 600s or whatever, two or three of those, which would then recharge the light as soon as the weapon is reholstered, and then the person would be responsible for like once a week, just make sure they go home and charge the battery pack on the holster,
Yeah.
as part of their duty belt type of deal. But now you're into holsters, lights, the design, and I'm sure you still put a green laser in there somewhere.
And a red dot sight and
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
compass and
Don't forget the
a
what do
cell
they call the
phone.
little, yeah. Well, it's I will say though, it gets a lot easier. It gets geometrically easier the larger it gets. So
Yeah.
if we go from a pistol mounted light to a long gun light,
Oh yeah.
now you're a rectangular cube battery that is 80 millimeters long.
Sure.
And that thing would light up a football field with our technology. And so you run into problems when you're trying to make things smaller and smaller and smaller. But if it's just a matter of having the magnetic charge on both sides of the holster and the gun light, it's interesting you say that. There was a location in San Joaquin County, Central California. Here we go again. But it would be a lot easier if you have your duty belt, you take your gun off in the holster, whatever, but you never take the gun out, you never take the light off, you plug into the holster
Hmm.
instead. And I thought that was a really clever idea, and you've just reiterated that. So I think that's an easy fix because at that point, you're just putting a really thick nickel, the radius and size of a nickel, maybe twice as thick, but you put that on the rear back of the light, and that touches or connects with the holster, and you're in business.
Arguably, it's safer too because you're not unholstering
Oh yeah.
the
Oh
weapon
yeah.
in order to provide it power. And I mean, that's a reach because we're talking now about injection molds, which are really expensive, or things like that that are maybe going to take a
Yeah.
while to come to fruition. But I mean, in the process of bringing this to market, I'm assuming that the product is, at least most of it is offshore parts. True statement. And if so, what are the effects of the recent tariffs? Is it affecting you really at all materially?
So I know everything about it. That they're gonna help bring manufacturers back here. That's a little more long term, but for now,
Well, it's a
what
long
you'll like.
game. You're not just going to,
Oh yeah,
yeah, the effects, it's like seasons, right? I mean,
yeah.
the first day of winter is the shortest day of the year. You'd think that'd be the middle of winter, but it's not. There's a delay effect in the
Yeah.
environment. The environment here is no different. It's going to take a while to see the benefits.
Well, I think what was interesting is the data is starting to come in, and you saw all of these delays and tariff issues because in response to Trump and his team, manufacturers from overseas were flooding the market at the highest price possible, which is the biggest tell and mistake they could have made. Because if you get too much inventory, you're going to essentially lower the interest rate because the product is in such quantity that the price will organically go down. If they didn't send anything, they said, you know what, we're not going to send Roy any of his LEDs. South Korea, we're not sending Roy any of our batteries that go through China and then to here, um, then then yeah, that would have been a standoff. But instead, they tried to flood the market to make as much money as they could before the tariffs were instituted. And that was a critical mistake on their part. So the quick answer is that the tariffs didn't affect us at all. But then again, we're talking about shoestring, right? An LED, they're a penny a piece,
Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
they're inexpensive.
low
Yeah,
margin item.
Oh my goodness. And the batteries, they're made everywhere. They're made in South Korea, India, you name it, Vietnam.
right.
But the majority of them wind up in Shenzhen, China. They'll wrap them, put the little blue safety restrictor on them, and then ship a container, a couple tons of them to whomever. They'll put their logo on them and say made in the USA.
Mm.
Because it's fascinating. If you try to obtain commercial liability insurance on a product and you turn one screw, and I mean one, and you have somebody that could get injured, you're the manufacturer, hands down, hard stop. And so for a lot of people to say made in the USA, I'm not doubting them, but I'm just a little reluctant. To what extent are they made in the USA though?
Right.
Right? And so the whole point of the flashlight is to bolster law enforcement in the USA, military, for the USA. And so I do see a day very soon, although extremely expensive, over $200,000 to print those little circuit boards with the
Yeah.
LEDs. They're incredibly expensive, but that's one time and you're done. And then you can start to, create volume, printing 5 or 6 thousand units a month, and so, but I think I don't want to get too far off topic with this, but I think China's old guard is inhibiting and has a damaging effect on a lot of good people that are there. Same thing in India, same thing in Vietnam. Like some of the old school kind of iron fist, the military has to be involved in anything important. I think that's a dying effort. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that are getting more and more global than you know physically centric. So.
So I'm looking forward to, seeing your product. I don't know if you've heard about what Contra Costa County here is doing here in California.
Ah,
They recently they have banned, you got to love this. This is another, banning firearms. They have banned weapons mounted flashlights, lasers and red dot optics on any firearm that's carried on your CCW. So they've now made it illegal in just one county, Contra Costa County. And we have 58 counties in the state of California. So one of them, and yeah, California is like a cancer. When we have a stupid idea, it grows and grows.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't doubt that other stupid counties are going to start adopting this. Oh yeah, you can't have a flashlight, Arlen. Why would you want to be able to identify your target before you take your shot? I mean, come
Oh,
on.
because criminals all use red
Right.
dots, right? That's
Yeah.
what they train with.
And
Yeah.
exactly. And I think it's fascinating. Where I live in New York, the entire state is bright red, right? But then you go Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, New York City, it's like blue atom bombs went off right there,
Yeah.
and so it's so interesting, and so is California. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at the constituency mapping, but like you say, they are so monkey see, monkey do. And a lot of it has to do with insurance, right? So the insurer says, oh, good, this is a good way we're going to make money because, if civilians, can't carry them, they're less likely to use them, and maybe they won't shoot somebody and they get sued, and then the homeowner's policy, right? So the most abstract logistical justifications take place, Ken, within that realm, right? Why on earth? Like you say, the bad guys are going to throw a Molotov cocktail at you. They're going to throw a knife at you. They'll kill you if they want to, right? And
Hmm.
so to say that a gun that has a light or a laser is going to make any difference, it's going to hurt the citizen.
Yeah.
It's going to promote the criminal activity, which I hope Mamdani wins the mayoral race in New York City so they can see exactly what they elected, right? And what they elected was anger. And so the same thing in California. Like a good friend of mine, Larry Elder, ran against
Hmm.
Gavin
Sure.
Newsom. And man, him and I did so many commercials together, and it was sickening to see how much a campaign will use items like gender or race or nationality. But then, if there's an opponent who happens to be within one of those categories who is not of the same political bias, they will obliterate them. And so, for the time when he was walking through his old neighborhood. This guy grew up in East LA,
Hmm.
right? Gavin grew up with a spoon in his mouth from Nancy and John Pelosi or Paul Pelosi, right? So
Hmm.
but then they throw an egg at him. A white guy throws an egg at a black person in one of the worst neighborhoods, and that would have been, if I'm the governor of California, my focal effort for the next year. Like that would be in every news cycle that this has got to stop. But they endorsed it, Ken. They said, "See, that's what the public thinks. That's why we're successful as a state." And it's that doesn't surprise me. Contra
Yeah.
Costa County, come on, you know.
So in closing out, Roy, you got any closers that are maybe entertaining stories or any little snippet you haven't covered? And by the way, I would invite you also if you have a website or you're going to be making personal appearances at any of the trade shows other than SHOT, coming up. You have a YouTube channel or anything you want to promote. The floor is yours as we finish out.
Well, the NDAs have allowed me now to come onto your show, and hopefully, we can educate more people. We're going to launch the website in a technical format, so it appears as any retailer online. That would be at Lights for Lives. So lights, the number four, lives.com. So lightsforlives.com. But yeah, you'll see this effort across all social media channels. I look forward to the SHOT Show, as a matter of fact, because um, there is a direct correlation between the UFC and law enforcement military. It is it they walk side by side. And so we're gonna have a couple celebrities with us. Uriah Faber, he's a Hall of Famer. There's a couple active fighters. One of them fights this weekend. So root for Josh Emmett. But yeah, we'll be a media. We'll have a social media presence very soon. I think the videos that we've come up with, that's been the most, how would you say, validating experience I've had because we go into Uriah Faber's gym, right? And there's a couple folks from law enforcement with me. And so it's a humongous gym. So he has, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, all the power's out. And so these guys are scary looking, right? They beat people up for a living, right? And so they're hiding in different spots of the gym. And, as you walk into a gym, lots of times the left and right walls as you walk in are long, like 50 feet long, 100 feet long, because you're walking into basically a warehouse. And so Josh Emmett, who is Joe Rogan's one of his favorite fighters, is literally standing about 75 feet to the right in a corner. If you turn the lights on, he would be in plain sight, but he was just standing with his arms kind of like, or like hands in his pockets, trying to be as still as he could. And so we walk in, and the officer has I'll call it the single beam light, right? And so, she's spanning and tells, three or four people, get your hands up, get your hands up, get down on the ground. Okay, doesn't notice Josh the entire time. So this is like 60 seconds of him staring at us. And
Uh-oh.
I know. And so we go back outside, put the other lights on the guns, go back in, and she lists around the corner and the right side, so the 3 o'clock LED, it lights him up. And here's this guy just looking right at her. And she's like, "Oh, I'm dead. And I'm going to recommend this to the firearms committee." It happened
Do
that
do I get to
fast.
do I get to post the link to that in the show notes?
Oh my goodness. I actually have the video. Um
I
let
want something our listeners can take a look at.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Let me get permission on that so I don't open up that can of worms. But oh yeah,
Okay.
it was one of the oddest locations to do it too because there's so many things in a gym that are like chrome, like reflective. And so it's weird, like all the mirrors and you can hide pretty well in those things behind the treadmills and stuff. But anyway, I got a kick
Okay.
out of that. But
Well, thank you, Roy, for coming on the
my
show.
pleasure.
Actually, this has been, I haven't checked yet. I think it's the longest show we've ever recorded, but it doesn't feel that way
Good.
because the content is so engaging and so good. And Ken, what else you got for Roy?
No, I've really appreciated coming on. I really appreciated having an opportunity to look at this really groundbreaking product, and it's something that I definitely want to add to my carry as soon as I can, as soon as it becomes available.
Yeah, exactly.
Bless your heart. Just one last comment that it's near and dear to my heart, but half of what I make, I can't, of course, after expenses, but there's 5 cancer centers that are the reason I'm here, and I am not impressed by money at all, and so anything I can do to help these boys and girls. I mean, I'm surrounded by UFC fighters, but they all say the same thing, especially some of those that I've taken through the cancer ward where I've done murals and stuff like that. And that's the true fight. It's a strung out mental, physical battle that I wouldn't want my worst enemy to go through. So that half of what I'm making is going to go to some of those big locations like Memorial Sloan and UCD and et cetera. So
Can you send us some, because we're all about promoting here, right? And can you send us maybe the links of a couple places you'd like listeners, if they're so inclined,
Hmm.
no obligation, but if they're inclined, that we could post for you?
oh yeah, 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 absolutely. Like for example, like personal website or a personal email address.
Well, no, I was referring to that too. If you want inquiries about, perhaps people who, may want to join your team or invest along with you or something
Oh,
like that. But
sure.
I was referring more to the, what cancer centers you recommend people donate to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, the Mayo Clinic, um, University of San Francisco, University of Davis, and then Stanford. Those were the five that collaborated, and they took risks. Usually, when you're stage four, you'll have high dose chemo and radiation, and if it comes back. Usually, if it comes back quickly, there's not a whole lot you can do. You're usually put on hospice, and so a lot of folks at a couple of these health systems said, "Nope, he's young enough. We can try it," because the bone marrow transplant sounds like a simple procedure where it's a physical operation, when in fact they bring you down, they bring your white counts down to zero. And to do that, it's like you're drinking gasoline for a month. And
Mhm.
so, and then when they have your white counts as low as humanly possible before you pass away, that's when they reinfuse the bone marrow, almost like a,
Painful.
well, yeah, the bone marrow aspirate. Oh my goodness,
Hmm.
yeah. When they have to take those samples, that's very, very real. That's corkscrew real. But yeah, those five locations are so so integral to my being and going forward. So
All right. Great show. Great show. Thanks very much, Roy.
yeah.
Appreciate you having you on, sir.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Take
All right.
care.
Well, today we had Rory come on and talk to us about a new product that he's going to be bringing to the market here shortly. We had the opportunity to take a look at a pre-production or near production weapons mounted light for your, for example, any of your Glocks or any railed handgun that you might have. That instead of just shooting a 30 or 40 45 degree beam out in front of you, shoots a 180-degree beam left to right. Phenomenal opportunity to really give you situational awareness. So very much enjoyed it. Very much looking forward to seeing what the final product will be. We'll definitely be ordering one of them. Greg, your take on it.
And while it was developed from the inspiration of a law enforcement engagement that went the wrong way, the applicability of this product, reaches definitely into the civilian sector. A person who's trying to, I mean, maybe even more so than law enforcement, because if law enforcement goes in a stack and they got a team of five guys, two, maybe five guys, something like that, there's going to be multiple lights in the space. For a homeowner, you know, whether or not it's a good idea to quote unquote clear your house to begin with is tactically questionable. But let's say you're in that situation, the ability to solo light up a space that without turning on all the lights, be able to see the pets, children, or the perpetrator, that matters. And that's going to be worth the cost of entry on this product, which we don't even know yet.
Right. We don't know
Yeah.
yet. I'm just looking at the technology. It is a real game changer.
It is. It is. So long show, but absolutely great content. Just great content. So next time we're looking to do. I got a couple of the companies that reached out to. One that was been very difficult to get a hold of finally reached back to me today and at least acknowledged our presence, which is nice. So we'll see about getting them on. Ken and I have also reviewed some products that we are going to do just a solo, our own opinion product review show. And Ken, something we haven't talked about in a long time is our product value ratings. So we have to kind of resurrect that. We talked about that early on. And even though we don't know the price of Roy's Light yet, I think it's going to have a very high product value rating because it's just so damn unique. But there's a few other things like we were just using at the range the other day, clear ballistics gel. And
Yeah.
we could talk about that. We'll talk about that too, because there's alternatives, that are homegrown.
Hmm.
And and I think you have a couple ideas on things you want to talk about too. So they'll come up, a few weeks out from now. But in the meantime, please, please share, please leave a comment. Comments are very helpful in the algorithms, the way they work. If you are interested in being on the show or you have questions or comments, both critical or positive, it is Frugal Firearms Podcast at gmail.com. Of course, the website is frugalfirearmspodcast.com. And again, tell your friends because word of mouth is working and looking at the distribution map of podcast. It keeps showing up in different parts of the world where it didn't before. So it's definitely getting out there. So thank you, listeners, and good night.
Good night, everyone.
Oh my goodness. Like they're paying 100 grand for a week.
Yes, they are. And you know what? If you want to get a keg of beer and just in the afternoon or something, that'll get people to come by. That's going to cost you hundreds. That keg of beer will cost you hundreds of dollars.
Yep.
Right.
So
Oh my God. Depending on the beer. No Keystone Light. No Keystone.
I hope not. Well, Ken doesn't drink, but I do. So I will drink Ken's beer.
Yeah, I'll yeah. If you pour me one, I'll hand it to. I'll hand it.
I tell you what, last year they had a place. I usually look for it in about the 2:30 and later 3 o'clock range is when they'll start coming out. Some guy last year on the first floor had it out at 12:30, and I'm like, oh God damn it, free beer.
Come on.
Now I'm obligated to drink this.
Yeah.
Damn it.
I mean, you got to pitch in.